Yep.
Okay, good.
Okay, so this is Faith and Calm Part 16, and tonight's topic is about fears and worries and the healthy approach to your fears and worries. So we have no problems with it. Well, we have a problem with the healthy approach. We have problems with the fears and the worries. Oh, it's no problems at all. Not only that, but it's the 3 weeks, which is the the 3 weeks before the destruction of the temple. There was a fast day on the 17th of Tammuz last Thursday, and then this is a traditional time of mourning and terrible things happening to the Jews. So if you're feeling a lot of stress, which I am, certainly, you're not alone. This happens every year in a certain spiritual level, that there's something going on. And until we get to Tisha B'Av. And so it's a good time to talk about, I thought, about fear and worries. Because it's relevant, and people like to hear things that are relevant, relevant to them and relevant to what's going on. It hits home in a very visceral kind of way. So we have to start out with a joke then, of course. So maybe it's not a joke. So I mean, I have 3 little jokes about worries and fears. One of the statements about worry is that worry is praying for things that you don't want to have happen. That's what you're thinking about. You're thinking about what you don't want to have happen, so you spend your time doing that, which is not very productive. And the second little ditty about worries is that worry is wasting today's time to obstruct tomorrow's opportunities with yesterday's fears, yesterday's problems. So that's another way of thinking about fear and worry. And of course, Rabbi YY's favorite, and I think I like it too, is worry is like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy, but it doesn't get you anywhere. So I think I've said that one before, but if no one hasn't heard that one, it's cute. It's keeps you busy.
Good one.
Keeps you busy. So like I said, worry and fears is tonight's topic. And we don't have to imagine, after all these weeks of the virus and what's happening with the economy and what happens in with crime and everything else going on, anti-Semitism. Thanks, just keep pulling them in. Fill in the blank. What's the next one? Okay, let's go with it. It's it does have an effect on us. Even if we know Bayes' theorem, and there's no such thing as the conditional probability is not greater, but whenever bad things aren't happening, we tend to think that other things are going to happen. It's not always statistically factual true, but but that's the human psyche. We do tend to think that we see this, we see that. What's going to happen now? So, okay, I've made it. I hope I'm bringing everybody up on this subject here and so forth. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with those worries? So, well, one of the first steps is that you got to identify that, and you got to identify it in your life. And once you isolate it and quarantine it, then you have a chance of dealing with it. So here's a story I heard, again, from Rabbi YY. I have to give the sources. Rabbi YY, I heard it from. And he was talking about a friend of his who was traveling up to a wedding. He and his wife at a wedding from New York to go to Montreal. And they ran out of food on the trip, and there's no places to buy food. And so he was getting hungrier and hungrier and hungrier, but he was looking forward to the wedding because he knew there'd be a lot of food and dancing and all the other party stuff at the wedding and so forth. And they got there. And as soon as he got there, his wife pulls him out and he says, "You got to talk to the shadchan. We've been trying to marry off, I don't know if it's the son or the daughter or something like that. But we haven't been able to reach this guy. And he's here right here. He's here right now. You got to go talk to him." So he goes over and he talks to him. And it takes a while, and when he gets, and he had to get up right when they were serving the food. And so he gets back to his table, the waiters, I don't know if you've been to Jewish weddings, but they're very swift about taking everything away. It comes in, the food comes in, and it goes back to the kitchen. So there was no food there, so he didn't get to eat. So he's feeling sort of aggravated, but he knows that he's going to, he'll just go into the kitchen because there's all this wasted food in the kitchen. They'll have plenty of spares. And then his wife comes over to him again and says, "No, we got to go home right away." something happened with the babysitter's family, and she has to rush home. And so we have to drive back right now. We can't wait 1 minute. So he's driving back home. He didn't eat on the way. He didn't get to the wedding, and his stomach is rumbling, and he's furious. He can't control himself. He just gets into this mood, And his wife is sensitive, and she notices that he's sort of like in a different world. She says, "What's the problem?" And so he has to talk. And so he starts saying, actually, I'm really upset because I didn't get to eat anything. The chicken was on my plate, and I didn't get to eat it. It's not rational. It's some deep psychological limbic system, thing in our brain, especially men's brains. They get very antsy and angry at dinner time and so forth. They haven't eaten and so forth, and they're upset, and they, because they're hungry, and they get angry and upset. And as soon as he said this, he started laughing because, he's upset. He's going to get angry at his wife because of a piece of chicken. It wasn't her fault. But, sometimes you have to bring the thought out. You have to share it with somebody else. You have to expose it, because that's really where these things fester in the dark. When you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about yourself, and you're thinking about your own issues and so forth, and you're very concerned about, you're egocentric and about yourself, that's where they really grow the most. And so sometimes it's the best thing is to converse, and more business for Amy. Share it with your therapist, and maybe you'll both have a good laugh about why are you so upset about a piece of chicken. What could you do? And didn't work out anyway with the shotgun. So that's the first step. That's one thing. The second one is, and I've told the story before, but I think this is also extremely important in the Jewish approach to dealing with these things. And that is to realize that you're not alone, and that God is with you in all of everything that you're going on. I just heard it today from Rabbi Rannis Friedman. He had a little video out there. He called it, "Does God Hate Me?" And he told the story at the beginning of this 12-year-old girl that came to him once and said she was convinced God hated her. And she was, he was really angry with her. And so, he always has an unusual approach. And so he said, "Really?" He said, "Let's think about this," and so forth. You must be somebody very special because, of all the people in the world, God has decided to get angry with you. I mean, you've made him angry. You're pretty important. You're pretty powerful. If you thought about that, God, you've really got under his skin, and so forth. So there's a compliment there that you actually bother God. And then the second thing he told her was, it's not possible, really, that God can be angry or upset with us. He's not like a scorekeeper, somebody distant and somebody who's somewhere remote and keeping tallies of how many things you do right and wrong and so forth. That's really not what the Jewish idea of God is. That's not the truth of what God is. God is inside of us. He's the deepest, truest part of ourselves. He is what animates us. He's what gives our soul. He gives us our life. And he is not something distant, but he is together with us. It says an interesting line in the Torah. It says, "V'shavta Hashem im yeshuvutecha." God will return with his exiles. And the Hasidic masters explain and says that when the Jews are in Galus, when the Jews are in exile, God is also in exile. God, because when he suffers with us and he is together with us and he is part of us and he can't detach himself with us. He is part of who we are. And so it's not possible that he's going to hate himself because we are a chelik, we are a part of godliness. So how can he hate himself? Now, just like a mother in a child relationship, a child can do things that can hurt the mother and the mother can get very perturbed about it. But she's never going to cut off the relationship because of that. In fact, she's upset and hurt what the child did because of how close the connection is. Not because she's angry with the child and she wants to hurt the child. You just don't act that way. So God doesn't act that way either, even during the 3 weeks. He's not angry with us and he's not trying to punish us. But he can be very hurt, because he feels the pain himself. He feels the pain of our exile and our pain and our suffering. So we have to understand that he is together with us, and wherever we go, he is with us. And that is actually a very helpful thought. How is that a helpful thought? Because the example that Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, I think I gave this one before, gave once. It says that, how can we, that it says that whenever the Jews traveled in the wilderness, in the Midbar, wherever they went, they were always in the same place, in the camp of Israel. And the question is, how can they always be in the same place? So he gave this analogy, which I think is very endearing. He talks about a mother, a young mother of a young infant who had to take a trip to many different countries around the world, and she takes her little infant with her. And so when she gets to Tokyo and she has to go through the passport control, at the airport, she takes the kid with her. And then when she comes later to India, she also makes a stop, and also she has to get off the plane and off the plane, and the kid is with her. And everything that she goes, in every country that she visits, the little kid is with her. And he says, if you could interview the mother, you could say, where were you the last 10 days? And she would have said, well, I was in Japan, I was in India, I stopped off in Israel, I stopped in Brazil, and I was in New York, and I was in all these different places. And if you could interview the little infant and ask the infant, where were you all the time? The infant would answer, I was always in exactly the same place. I was in my mother's arms. That's where I was all the time. And that's the thought that helps us to get going, because we're always in God's hands, and we're always together with him, and he's always together in whatever situation that we find ourselves. That's where we are. We're together with God. And sometimes they're very challenging situations, and sometimes they're very painful, and sometimes we don't know how to get out of it. But the point of all of this is in order is to make some profit out of it. If you notice on Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up actually, we blow this thing called the shofar. And the shofar is narrow at one end and it's wide at the other. And we read a prayer, a psalm beforehand. We say, Min ha-meitzer karasti la. From the narrowness, from the tightness, I call out from you. And this is the prayer, for some reason, that's chosen before reading about blowing the shofar. Because I don't know if you've ever tried blowing a shofar, but if you blow it from the wrong side, you don't make any sound. But if you blow from the narrow side, it comes out very loud. So it's saying that, you know what, sometimes our best work and the best part of the Jews come out when you're like an olive, when you squeeze them. When you squeeze them and you put them under pressure, you come out with wideness, expansiveness. It's just we find new depth and new strength inside of ourselves. And this is part of the reason why we go through these cycles, is God says, you know what, I need you to get closer to me, and it's like a toothache or something else. Wake up, you have deeper powers and greater powers inside of yourself, and you can reach to a higher level than you were before. And maybe you weren't able, we don't like to be stretched and we don't like to be pushed, but when we are pushed, you know what? We find out that we have more in us and more capabilities than we ever knew before. And that is also part of the message of any difficulties and any worries that we're going through. That, in order that we're not being told that we're not liked, we're being told that, you know what? You have abilities and strengths, and they're God-given, and you can do a lot more than what you thought you could do, and you can accomplish more. And we stop thinking about yourself and start making that pop. Instead of worrying about what today for what you have to, about the tomorrow, and you take advantage of the opportunities that you have today, because we all have greater opportunities these days now to reach more people, to talk to more people, and to affect more people. As they are more affected right now, then we're open to being listening, because they would be normal work days, they're just too busy. So we have more time and more ability to do what we're really here on this world to do, to accomplish the task that we were supposed to do, that we can have this influence on people. And that's an important part of what this whole effort that this is about. And then to continue, I think another way to think about it is that also there's this thought in psychology, it's called learned helplessness. I don't know, Amy, you ever hear of this term, learned helplessness? Oh, she has heard of it. Amy's on top of all of the stuff. Good to know. What is learned helplessness, or hopelessness? So the story that I heard that explains this is, I don't know if you know this, but in India, I think they still do. I mean, in America, they stopped. They raise elephants and they use them as domestic animals. In America, I think out of the the circus has stopped anyway, because elephants are very sensitive animals. But how did in India, how did they get a big elephant to actually be so docile and domesticated? It's a wild animal. How do you control such a thing? So they have a technique. The technique is when the elephant is a little baby, they take a cord, a rope, and they tie one end to the leg of the elephant and the other to a tree. And the little elephant doesn't like this, and he pulls and he pulls and he pulls, but because he's a little elephant, he can't, after a few weeks, he just gives up trying to pull against that cord because it's just not helping. And the funny thing is that when the elephant becomes bigger and could do anything with that rope or even a chain or anything else, a little rope around the leg and the elephant won't run away. They can tie a little rope around it because he's so used to thinking about, that rope is, he's not going to get anywhere with it. And if you want to think about it, this is not just elephants, this is us too, psychologically. We put ourselves sometimes in a certain mindset and we think this is how it is and that's how it's going to stay. And we don't discover the deeper powers inside of ourselves, the ability to be able to transcend where we are right now. And so we think, we get this mindset, that this is who I am. I'm never getting married. I'm never always a loser. I can never get my clothes together in time. Whatever it is, that I have, my time getting organized in something like that. I'm always going to be a person who's a nebuch case and so forth. And the truth is you're not, because God says you're not. He doesn't want you to be that way. He doesn't like to see you that way. But he's giving you messages saying, get out of that situation. Get out, get out, get out. And the problem is that we still pretend like we have around our leg. And we think that that is who we are and we can't get out of it. And that's partly what the message is to say, you know what? You have ability to change reality. If you think I'm just talking fantasy or something like that, it's actually very much in the world of physics these days. In physics, they have in quantum dynamics, I'm not going to get into the double slit experiments, but basically they have discovered that how we view the situation actually affects the physical world. As Max Planck said once, it is not our consciousness is affected by the physical world, it's actually our consciousness changes the physical world. How we look at the situation actually changes what's happening in the world. Where the photon goes, where the other thing goes, and everything else about reality is very much affected by how we look at that world. And how we think about it is how it's going to be. Or to quote the great anti-Semite who had a great line to say, and I've said it before here, Henry Ford, he said, if you think you can't or you think you can, you're right. Either way. And go Google it. That's what he said. And that's what he said. If you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So it's really much up to us and how we look at the situation and how we think and we frame the situation is what's going to actually happen. There's a story about one of the Hasidim in Russia, not so long ago, maybe 100 years ago. He was a Hasid of the Rebbe Rashab. His name was Mendel Kolnitschka. Maybe it was even later. And he lived in a time in the late 1800s, when the Russian army was at war as usual, and the Tsar had a decree to conscript soldiers, Jewish soldiers, every kind of soldiers, and it was not a safe place to be. It was a terrible place for a Jewish kid to be, and besides, the Russian army was always failing anyway. They lost in World War I, they lost in the Japanese-Russia war. You didn't want to be in the army. So many Jewish kids tried to get out because it was a big danger to their Jewishness to be there. And this Mendel Kolonecki, he was involved in trying to help Jewish kids escape from the army because they would be conscripted for like 30 years, taken those young kids and ripped away from their family and tried to convert them to Russian Orthodoxy. Anyway, so he was involved in this program and he did many underground and many secret activities. And one time somebody got angry with him and decided to inform on him to the government. And he found out about this. And as soon as he found out, he ran to his Rebbe, who was the Rebbe Rashab. That was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said, what should I do? And the Rebbe Rashab told him a very interesting thing. He said, let me ask you a question. When you were doing this, trying to save the Jewish kids, did you do it entirely altruistically for no money whatsoever? Or were you also asking for money because you're risking your life, which is okay. You know, it's a business, but it's a business that you're risking your life to help people on. So, you know, I just need to know which way you're doing it, because if you did it entirely for the sake of the mitzvah, then you have absolutely nothing to worry about. But if you did it and you were expecting also to get paid back some money for saving the child's life, then you should run away as fast as possible. Which is a very interesting answer, because it really says that we really have the control in our lives to change the situation ourselves. We can live in either one of two worlds. We can either live completely within the physical world and by the constraints and the restrictions of the world, or we can realize that we have a godly soul in it, and that we're Jewish and we're miraculous people, and we can live somewhere on a higher level than this. And especially now, coming before Mashiach, we have the ability to accomplish things that we never could before. And that is really what the message is coming down here. Are you going to live within the physical world, or are you going to look and see what's behind the physical world? Because behind everything that runs the physical world is sourced in the spiritual. It's higher up. And if we can connect to that level, then you can connect to a more powerful place, and you can actually live that way. But if you want to, you have free choice, and then it will come with the usual problems and the usual difficulties and so forth. So this is our ability to choose one of the two possible paths of how things play out. And that's part of what we need to do in order to get rid of our worries. And when we do this, we can live. We can, because it's certainly possible, and it's certainly reasonable, and and there's no shame, to be affected by what you see happening in front of your eyes. But you don't have to be that way. You don't have to live in a way that's always being event-driven and effect-driven by what you see and what you hear. You can also be a force to actually changing the world, because what actually powers the world and the energy that keeps the world going and so forth. So there was a guy who wrote in, it was an interesting poem he wrote in. I don't know where he found it. He found it on the internet somewhere. And he says, it says everybody is right now with the virus is in the same boat. We're in a stormy sea and everybody's in the same boat. And the poem continues and says, we're not actually in the same boat. We're all in the same stormy sea, but we're in different boats. And so you really have a choice of what boat you want to be in. You can be in the boat and you can be thinking, my life is it's a terrible storm. I think the boat's falling to pieces and everything is going wrong. Or you can be in the boat and you can be in the storm and you can be saying, hey, this is a great chance for surfing, or I don't know what you think it is, It's something interesting to do, but there's all sorts of opportunities to be able to test me and to find my challenge and to find new skills inside of myself. And to be able to affect people. And I think that the key idea in order to lift up is in order to say, stop focusing on one's own ego in this time and one's own survival, and start thinking about, what can I do for others? Because when you're focused on others, then all of a sudden you stop worrying so much about yourself. You start being able to see yourself as something positive, and you be able to start seeing somebody who's able to affect and to be able to give other people strength. And the more you do that, I think the stronger you become. And then the first part that I talked about too, to realize that wherever you are and whatever challenges you are, you have the biggest fan in the world who's trying to help you. I'll conclude with a cute little story. I think it's relevant to this too. So there was once a little boy who wanted to give a gift to his parents. So he goes to his mother, He doesn't tell her the reason. He says, "Mommy, I need $100." And the mother says, "Ask your father." He goes over to the father and he says, "Daddy, I need $100." He goes to his father, says, what do you need it for? And he says, "I can't tell you." So his father doesn't give him the $100. So he goes back to his room and he writes a letter to the Lord of the USA. And he says, so he writes down and he says how much he wants to make this gift for his parents, and how he asked his mother and he asked his father for $100 and he didn't get the $100. So now he's writing to God, and he addressed the letter Lord of the USA, and he puts it on a stamp and he sends it off. The post office gets it. And the postman looks at this and figures Lord of the USA. I guess he means the president. And this was the era of Obama. So he sends the letter to the White House. So Obama gets this letter addressed to Dear God. He looks at the letter and he thinks, oh, how cute. The kid wants $100. You know what? Send him, tells his assistant, send him $5. He'll be happy he got something. And, good. The letter comes back. The kid opens up the letter. He sees there's $5. And he takes out a pen and he gets out a paper and he starts writing a letter back to God. And then the letter, he says, Dear God, thank you so much for sending me the $100. For some reason, though, you decided to send it through those folks in Washington. And those thieves, they took 95% in taxes. Says, next time, God, send it direct. So the point of the story is as follows. The kid sensed it and so forth. You can either try and go direct to the source of where all your blessings are coming from, go straight to God and put your faith in God and put your trust in God, because that's where the health is going to come and that's where the success is going to come. Or you can put your cup through Washington and then, they take, they take the taxes from you. You don't want that. I don't want that. So with that is the closing story here. I'm going to turn over the phone and the camera to my wife, and she's going to continue explaining to you about dealing with worries in a healthy way.
Thank you,
Thank you. Yes, your call.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, good. So, obviously, that joke could have been told about any administration. So anyway, let's see. Okay. So hello, everybody.
Hello.
And okay, good to see everybody. Mrs. Samet. Okay, good.
Hi.
Hi. How are you? So nice to see you. Okay, now, first of all, who's going to be my timer? I need somebody. You remember, we have recorder off time at the end of this session, and that we can sing, we can do whatever we want after I turn off the recorder. So who wants to remind me at 10 of that in 5 minutes we have recorder off time? Anybody want to volunteer for that? Okay, thank you. Okay, wonderful. So anyway, and okay, so the main thrust of these, at least of my part of these classes, is to remind us that we are all of us together. We're in an extraordinary time, and the second thing is that we ourselves are extremely important this time. We were handpicked. Our souls, our neshamas, were handpicked to be at this crux of world history, and we have a job to do. And it's important to know that. And God gave us various tools to accomplish our mission. One of the tools is the Torah. The Torah, if you even just read the Torah predicted everything that happened in human history so far. And it's an amazing, amazing thing. And we also have mitzvahs, which the mitzvot, they're like, the mitzvot not only change us, but they change the world. They actually transform the world. And we also have, and Hashem also has, we also have Mashiach. And we talked a little bit last week about the concept. We're going to talk more this week. And the fourth thing I want to remind us of is that what we're doing tonight itself is extremely important, because the Lubavitch Rebbe said that when you learn about Mashiach and Geula, you actually are hastening its complete revelation. So the struggle to understand these concepts and the even showing up is a major accomplishment. So we're doing something together right now. So Yasher Koach, congratulations to all of us. Now, I want to briefly review last week. And last week we discussed, okay, so we were discussing the concept of a Rebbe. And I was saying, when I was born and growing up, I never heard of such a thing. What's a Rebbe? I never heard of such a thing. Why do I have to? What good is a Rebbe? Why do I have to listen to what the Rebbe says? Why do I need to know anything about it? And we said last week that a Rebbe a Rebbe is my Hebrew is learned Hebrew, not Israeli Hebrew, so you'll forgive me, but a Rebbe is like a mechaber. A Rebbe joins us to Hashem. That's what a Rebbe does. That's a Rebbe's principal function. And I'm just going to go very briefly, because I don't think I made that point well enough last week, but very briefly about that wacky story that happened to me 21 years ago in the Elah, the last service of Yom Kippur. And I told you that you remember that Ne'ilah is a special time. In the Elah on Yom Kippur, the last of the 5 services on Yom Kippur, we have the potential to access a level of our soul that we don't have the potential to access at any other time, unless we're in personal crisis. And my congregation, my Lubavitch congregation, was davening at that time in the basement of a conservative shul called B'nai Moshe. And I was a Lubavitcher already for a few years. And I knew enough about Ne'ilah to say, oh, this is the time where, you have to really work hard to do it, but you can access the 5th level of your soul that's not even in your body. The 4th and 5th levels of your soul are both outside your body. So, and then another teaching came to mind that, well, if you picture the face of a tzaddik, you can also reach that 5th level, that level of Yechida. And you remember I told you last week that with no spiritual high, intentions or anything, just like a 3-year-old who's doing a science experiment saying, I wonder what would happen if I stuck my finger in this socket. That's exactly what I did. I said, I wonder what would happen if I daven Ne'ilah, and during Ne'ilah, where you can access the 5th level, I picture the face of the Rebbe, because when you picture the face of a tzaddik, you can also access your Yechida. And so that's what I did. I took out my siddur, and as I was davening Ne'ilah, I started picturing the face of the Rebbe. And the most amazing thing that ever happened to me in my life happened. All of a sudden, from Mars, from Jupiter, I don't know where it came from, I was crying with every ounce of my being, and words were tumbling out of my mouth. And I was saying, and I was hysterical, and I was saying, you don't have 4 walls. You don't even have 4 walls. Hashem, you don't even have 4 walls to call your own. And afterwards, when I recovered myself, I said, what was that? And I realized that I was living a very Kabbalistic concept called Shchinta B'Galusa, that I was experiencing Hashem's pain at not having a Beis Hamikdash, not having a home, because the Beis Hamikdash is Hashem's home. It's true, everything we do, every mitzvah we do provides a home for Hashem, but there's a physical home also, a very holy physical home, and he hasn't had it for 2,000 years. And the point I wanted to make that I don't really think I made last week is that what happened, I envisioned the Rebbe, and did I all of a sudden have a great connection to the Rebbe? No. The Rebbe shuttled me over like a fast train to Hashem, to a level of my connection with Hashem that I am totally unaware of. I have that connection to Hashem. You have that connection to Hashem. Every person on earth has a connection to Hashem, and every Jew has an unbelievable connection to Hashem, but we're not in touch with it. And so what did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe is a mechaber. Whoosh! He brought me together with the part of me that is like this with Hashem, that feels Hashem's pain, not concerned with myself at all, feels Hashem's pain and is like this with Hashem. That's what a Rebbe is, and that's why it's such the Rebbe is such an incredible asset. So anyway, so let's go to this week. So anyway, to finish it up, the Rebbe's also called, the Rebbe's called a roeh. He's called a shepherd of Israel. What is a shepherd? A shepherd is exactly that. What does a shepherd do? A shepherd leads his flock to the best pastures. He looks for the best pastures and he feeds them. The word in Hebrew for for shepherd is related to the word for nourishment. He looks for the best grass. He nourishes them. And that's what the Rebbe does for us. For each individual Jew, he helps us. He gives us the food that we need, the very food that we need. So to be close to Hashem, we are already close to Hashem, to access the closeness to Hashem that we already have. So today, I think I would like to go into something that people wonder about, and that is, why do we talk about Mashiach? Why do we have to talk about it? Let Hashem just bring Mashiach. Why do we have to? Well, why do we have to learn about it? It's his business. Let Hashem just bring Mashiach. And I'm going to give you a very, very practical answer about why we need to know about Mashiach now. And Mashiach has to be accepted by the people. And that's not as easy a job as you would imagine. And here's the problem. The problem is the Jewish people are extremely stubborn. And, we are a remarkable people. Hashem gave us remarkable talents, and one of them is a very stiff neck. We are very, very interesting people. And I want to let you know that, okay, who was the first Redeemer? Who was the first Mashiach of the Jewish people? The first Redeemer, was Moshe. Interesting fact, Hashem prepared the Jewish people for 425 years before Hashem appointed Moshe to be the Redeemer of the Jewish people at the burning bush. 425 years before, he started laying the seeds. He told Abraham, and then, your people are going to be in slavery. Don't worry. Afterwards, a great Redeemer is going to come and take them out and lead them to the Holy Land. And Abraham and Sarah told the next generation, and that generation told the next generation, we're going to be in slavery, but then we're going to have a great leader, a great Redeemer who's going to take us out. He's going to rescue us and take us out. Each generation told the next generation until we got to Joseph. You remember Joseph? Joseph rose to the position of viceroy in Egypt, and he told the Jewish people, this is the prophecy. You're going to go through rough times, but don't worry. A great Redeemer is going to come, and he's going to save you, and he's going to bring you out, and you're going to go to Israel. Hashem promised. And he even told us the password that this Redeemer would say. He said he's going to say, Pakad Pakadati, which means Hashem is saying, surely I have remembered you. And with all that preparation, 425 years of preparation, when Moshe came, the people, and he said, Pakad Pakadati, the Jews were momentary, they were relieved, but then things got worse, and they turned their back, and they said, we're not listening to you anymore. Since you came, things got worse. And even after Moshe did all 10 plagues, which were out of this world miracles, totally wacky miracles, even after that, 80% of the Jews did not want to leave Egypt with Moshe. And they didn't. And only 20% came out. So if I say that the Jews are a stubborn people and we need to be prepared, Hashem knows what he's talking about when he says, when he said you have to, the Jewish people, we need to learn about Mashiach. We need to know about it. So, there's a parallel in our times. In 1951, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe became Rebbe, he announced right then and there, guess what? It's happening in our time. Mashiach is coming in our time. And then in 1991, the Rebbe said Mashiach is in the world. He said Mashiach has already been revealed. He hinted many times that he is Mashiach. And he told us many amazing things that I've told you in different classes. But even today, many Lubavitchers who know that, they zip their lips and they don't tell anybody. It's important information, but they don't tell people because what will people think? So anyway, a good friend of mine, she once said, she's very outspoken, she said, Mashiach's job? Feh. Who would want it? It's the hardest job in the world. And that's just, and let's look at the rest of the Jewish people. There's such a huge percentage of Jews today who don't even identify as Jewish anymore. So Mashiach has a huge, he's a huge environment that he has to conquer, and he needs our help. So so anyway, I'm gonna I'm gonna skip straight to, yep, I'm gonna skip straight to our topic tonight that Yaskol Shimon brought out, the topic of fear. And you know, I have to say that Hashem has primed me for this topic my whole life, because you know, as you know, I'm a child of two survivors. I'm named after two people who were murdered. You know, I tell you this a few times, and much of my family was murdered. Not, you know, not in my time before I was born, but anyway, so I know what fear is like, and I know that the world can turn upside down. It can be normal and then turn upside down, and so I've developed many techniques during my life to work with fear. And one of them I told you about last week, and somebody actually got one of these. I haven't used it for years, frankly. I started using it again right now, you know, in recent, especially this past week. But I learned that if you declare with your mouth your faith in Hashem, it brings your faith out from the inside. So I have this tool. I set it. You can see how bad I am. I had to set it today for 13 minutes. I set it for short intervals. And when it goes off, I say, Rabbona Shalom, I trust you with every ounce of my being that I see your kindness today, because you're the master of kindness. And it is your way to do kindness with your creatures, especially with me. Tati Shepashmaim, please help me see your kindness. And it's a marvelous tool for me. It always helps. My second favorite tool for fear is women. You know, just seeing a woman friend, just spending time with a woman, you don't even have to talk about your problems. Just even seeing on Zoom, just seeing other Jewish women, seeing a holy face like Mrs. Cement, she won't show us her face, but seeing a face like that, you would be cured of any fear in 1 minute. And there's something about the company of Jewish women that is just extraordinary. You can talk about your problems or not talk about your problems. You can talk about anything under the sun, but it will make you feel better. And the third tool that I want to talk about today is something that I used even today. You know, for some reason, Hashem, you know, we've been doing this. This is the 16th week of our classes. And I have to say, through the pandemic, through all the, you know, the fear about the pandemic, and through the amazing anti-Semitism that's surfaced, and through the riots and everything else, you know, I was a happy camper. It wasn't really so much, it wasn't pushing my favorite buttons. It could be, because I was working like mad. I was teaching online, and I had to learn all these online skills, and I was working till late at night preparing, and so I didn't have an ounce left to even think about what's going on in the world. So 8 days ago, I finished my job, and lo and behold, Hashem decided, I gotta give you new material, Shalom Asifus. And he gave me one after another of things that Hashem knows my address. He really knows my address, and he gave me things that in normal times I get frightened about, and I got frightened. I really did. I'm gonna admit it. And so I was using all my tools. On Friday, I used all my tools, and then on Friday night, this is one of my favorite times. You know, fear can be a favorite time, I have to tell you. And not that I like it, I hate it more than anything else in the world. But on Friday night, because Friday had been a very bad day, very things happened that I really didn't like, and on Friday night, before candlelighting time, I was ready, thank God, or maybe right after candlelighting, I walked out in the street. And nobody was on the street. It was like, you know, it's a twilight. Nobody was out. And I walked down the street, and I just said, you know what? You love me. You love me. You love me. I didn't say anything about my loving Hashem. I just said, you know what? You love me. And that was very calming too. You know, it was very, very, very calming. So today, I was back in poor shape again, because I was having, you know, Hashem gave me all this material. And and I said, Ribono Shalom, I can't be like this. I need to be myself. I need to feel like myself. And I would have to say my best tool, my one of my chief sources of strength, maybe even my chief source of strength, is that I learned the works of the Lubavitcher Rebbe probably 7 days a week. I take a class 6 days a week for an hour. I learned the most recent talks of the Rebbe in 1991 and 1992 that he gave. Those are the last recorded talks of the Rebbe. And they are, it's a direct infusion into your body. It's just an amazing thing for me. And
Time.
oh,
Time.
I have 5 more minutes, or it's completely time. Oh, I have 2 more minutes. Okay, on my clock, I have 2 more minutes until 55. Okay, good. So anyway, I'm going to finish up, so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to pour myself into this class. And I dialed it up. It's an audio class, a participatory audio class. And I'm prepared to just like sink myself into it. And there's static on the phone and I can't hear anything. And I'm nervous anyway from all the things that were happening this week in my life. And all of a sudden I said, I can't do this. And I hung up. And thank God, over the years, my skills have built up. And I said, Shlomo, you're just going to do it on your own. Now, what was the Rebbe talking about? The Rebbe was talking about how to conquer something. It's Parshas Pinchas, last week's Parsha. The Rebbe talks about if you have something that you have to conquer, you know what you do if you want to conquer it. Good. You want to conquer it and you want that thing to go whimpering away. This is what you do. You conquer it with all 3 faculties that Hashem gave you. You conquer it with your thought, you conquer it with your speech, and you conquer it with action. And so if you're learning about something, nothing else exists. All the things you have to do in the afternoon, it doesn't exist. At lunch doesn't exist. Nothing exists. When you're doing something, you're doing it with every ounce of your being. And so I hung up the phone because I couldn't stand all the stagnant. I said, okay, we're doing it. And what did I start to read? And so what did I start to read? I'm going to read you a sentence in Hebrew. And remember, my Hebrew is learned Hebrew. It's not an Israeli Hebrew. So you'll have to put up with it. And I'm doing it with I'm saying I'm going to use my thought, speech, and deed. Here we go. I'm yours, Rebbe. I'm yours, Hashem. Okay, and I said, the Al Yadei Zeh, and through this, Sheyehudi Osa Avodaso B'Shlemus, that a Jew does his work in the world with completion. B'chol hapratim, in every single detail. The Al Yadei Hamachshava, through his thought, Dibur, speech, Umase, and his action, Shalo, of his. Hofech hu es kol ha'olam. He overturns, every time a Jew does this, he overturns the entire world, because the world is also split into these 3 categories. L'dir lo yisbarach, to become a dwelling place for Hashem. So what does that mean? Every time we conquer this stupid fear, whatever it is we have to conquer, every time we're doing it, we're not only helping ourselves, we are making a beautiful palace for Hashem. We're making a home for Hashem in this world. Hashem, I don't know if you know or don't know, but Hashem made, our world is Hashem made successive worlds of darkness, not physical worlds. Our world is the only physical world, but he made a world in which he was slightly concealed, and then a world in which he was more concealed, and a world in which he was more concealed, until he made our world, the physical world where he is, you could live a whole life and be oblivious to Hashem. And he put us here, and what is our job? What is the job of every person in the world, and particularly the Jewish people? To show that Hashem is running it. Every time we say this world has an owner, this world has a director, then we've made a world, we've made Hashem feel at home. So imagine if you had a home and you lived in this home and nobody paid attention to you, nobody even knew you existed, you're living in the home and they completely ignore you. Are you going to feel at home? Not at all. So what we do is we make a home for Hashem. So now it's recorder off time, and I'm going to turn it off. And Stop recording. Okay.